Very quickly telling a quick story, one of the favorite stories in my book, which is about a young man, his name is Levi Preston, who was at the Battle of Concord. Concord, you might recall, the Battle of Concord is when the British, who have controlled Boston, have decided to go out into the countryside, literally the countryside, and find munitions that are supposedly being hidden at Concord in Massachusetts. To get there, they have to go through Lexington, where the first shot is fired. They go to Concord, and there's a famous battle at a bridge in Concord, where the shot heard around the world is fired. Turns out is the opening of the American Revolution. Levi Preston was a young man at the Battle of Concord. At that battle, there were only about 100 or so individuals, and they were up against the full force, the full brunt of the British Army, who sent over 1,000 of their best trained troops out of Boston, many of them mounted. At the head of the mounted troops were the Hussars, which wore black to scare the people they were attacking. This is what they were facing. Levi Preston and his fellow patriots had weapons left over from the French and Indian War. They had no training. So as a good history would have it, Levi Preston is interviewed after the battle a few years later, and they asked him, the good historian asked him, Levi Preston, why did you go fight at the Battle of Concord? It's a very good question, given that his chance of death was extremely high. Well, was it, said the historian, was it the Stamp Act? You objected to the Stamp Act, having to pay taxes on every stamp. No, Levi Preston said, that didn't bother me that much. Well, surely, the historian said, it must have been the tea tax. You objected to the tax on your tea. No, I didn't drink tea, said Preston. Besides, the boys all threw it overboard. Well, it must have been those books you read. You must have read John Locke and all those books of Republican theory. No, I didn't read those, Preston said. I read the Bible, I read the Psalms, and that was about it. Read the Almanac. So what was it, the historian wanted to know from Levi Preston? Why did you go out and fight those British? And Preston turned to the interviewer and said it was actually quite simple. You see, we had always governed ourselves. We always intended to govern ourselves. And those British, they didn't think that we should. And that was the end of the interview. That interview, I think, encapsulates everything about America. One thing it reminds us is that when you're talking about the ideas of America, the principles of the thing, we have to get over the fact that we have hindsight. When I usually tell that story to audiences, to students, they nod their heads about the Battle of Concord, Paul Revere's riot. They've heard of everything. You know what happened. What's interesting about these ideas is to find out what someone did, not knowing what's going to happen. Levi Preston didn't know it was the opening of the American Revolution. That's what makes it interesting. It's also interesting because it points to, I think, the key principle of America, which is this idea of self-government. The thing that defines America. Before America, you have to understand that everyone was a subject, a serf, a slave. They had no standing. This changes with America with this assertion that we can govern ourselves.